This is I Have No Title and I Must Podcast, the show where we discuss any and all aspects of pop culture. We are your hosts, Tyler.
And Chris.
And of course, with the release of the new Indiana Jones movie, we're talking all things indie today. And it should be no surprise at this point, with as much as we talk about Star Wars, that crosses over into us being just as big of fans of Indiana Jones.
Yeah, since I was a kid. I remember renting the Indiana Jones video game for NES. I think it was Temple of Doom.
Possibly.
Or is there a Temple of Doom NES game? Did I Mandela effect that into existence? I don't know. It just popped into my head just now. But what is a surprise is we're on time for this one.
Yes. And we won't mention the new Indiana Jones movie because we're recording this before the movie comes out, though the video will be out after the movie releases. And we do plan to do an actual review of the new Indiana Jones movie, so we'll leave our thoughts for that.
Yeah, watch that.
So yeah, Raiders
of the Lost Ark.
Was that like your first take into Indy?
Yeah, I think it was. My aunts had all of them on VHS when I was a kid, and I spent a lot of time at my aunt's house and in the summers. And I remember rewatching those quite a bit and a few James Bond films. I remembered for the longest time, the Raiders of the Lost Ark was my favorite until I did see
Last Crusade.
Last Crusade. I don't know why I can't remember that. People always talk about like movies progressively get worse with sequels or what have you. But lightning struck twice and they made an even better third film.
Yeah, I really like Raiders, but so does everybody. So
yeah.
A lot of people have already said a lot of things about Raiders. So I'm like, what am I going to say about Raiders for this episode? And I do remember one thing. Everyone knows the scene where the guy pulls the sword and Indy just pulls the gun and shoots him. Mm-hmm. Well, everyone knows that at that time Harrison Ford was having stomach issues and he didn't want to film the fight scene. That's why he made the decision, like, hey, why don't I shoot the guy? But what most people don't know is that everybody but Spielberg were having the same problems. And that's because Spielberg was the only one that didn't eat the local food. He brought like a big container full of SpaghettiOs, and that's all he ate for the filming of that.
Are SpaghettiOs kosher?
I have no idea. But he also used the downtime to write E.T., so there's that little bit of information too.
So he did a Leonard Nimoy and took the path of least resistance. And if you know what I'm talking about, put it in the comments. I'm pretty sure Becky will. Okay, I mean, you get to see some Nazis get melted. Who doesn't love that? I love that, even though it did kind of freak me out when I was a kid and when I was a teenager. And whatever age I am now, kind of freaks me out. And that special effect was super awesome. I think maybe not as good as the one they did in Last Crusade. So the two main things, I don't want to go negative on this, but when talking about Indiana Jones, there's a point of contention that a lot of people come to, a fulcrum, an impasse, and that is Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, which I think we'll save to talk about. But in reviewing these films recently, I went back and watched Temple of Doom. And that is something, these two films, I think, hang in the balance for Indiana Jones and Indiana Jones fans. One of them is well hated, and one of them, I think, is kind of a mystery. It's kind of a weird thing because I think people might remember it better than it may actually be there, depending on when the last time you watched it was. The other two films, Raiders of the Lost Ark, is easily beloved, a cinematic masterpiece, as is Last Crusade, which some people have pointed out. They've never used Sean Connery in this capacity. Nobody ever thought to do this and say Sean Connery being like kind of a doddering older man, because he seemed like an older man for decades because he looks old. And he's one of those guys that, like, kind of, even when he was a suave younger man, he looked older than he was. So have him be Indy's dad, and the way they wrote him was just perfect. But not only that, he played the role so well.
Yes.
Surprisingly well. And they never did it again. Nobody ever thought to do that again or before. It's a singularity in his career.
What's interesting about his character is, one, they made a point to make sure he always had his gray beard and Indy was clean shaved. There's actually only a 12-year difference between them.
Yeah.
And I think his character, while being written, was actually modeled after Laurence Olivier. And I think at some point they actually wanted to have Lawrence in the movie as the Grail Knight, but because of health problems, he wasn't able to. But as far as Connery goes, he was always Lucas's first pick, but some interesting backup choices. One being Gregory Peck, which might have been interesting. But the most interesting backup choice to me was they had John Pertwee as one of the backup choices. And fans of Doctor Who will know him as the third Doctor.
You know, I'm going to say something blasphemous. I think, you know, I don't know what he would have done. No, I do. I do know. I think they've made the right choice with Sean Connery for two reasons. It gave him an opportunity to do something unique in his career. While John Pertwee is one of my favorite doctors, don't get me wrong, I actually love his Doctor, but I think he would have wanted to have been too physical in it. And he was the swashbuckling Doctor. He was the action man, the really heroic hero amongst all the doctors. And I think that would have shorn through a little much. Sean Connery just allowed himself to be subdued in this, you know, like looking at Indiana when he's doing all this motorcycle driving, like he's a bit annoyed with him. Yeah. Like, what are you doing? And still scolding him, but using his brain, you know, and like using the umbrella trick with the birds to bring down that plane.
Yeah.
That was pretty awesome. That was a pretty good sequence.
I would love to go and just watch Dr. No and see him as Bond, and then right after watch this to see the contrast and character.
Did he wear a white jacket in Dr. No as Bond?
I can't remember if he did or not.
If that was the one,
it's been a while since I've seen it.
I want to say yes, and that brings us to Temple of Doom, where we open up and they've got Indy in that white jacket, and it feels more like a James Bond movie than it has previously, which is weird because he's not a secret agent or a spy or anything or involved in tradecraft. He just wants to put things in museums. He just wants to see things preserved for antiquity, to preserve history so people can learn from it.
Well, I know Lucas at one point wanted to make him more Bond-like, but I think Spielberg had the better idea to lean into the professor instead of the secret agent, which was very much a good choice.
And still combine it with these hero aspects. He's still an action hero by night, as it were, although it seems to be by 2-week jaunt out of the or summer vacation. I just love all the scenes where he jumps out a window of his class to escape, and he's just like, take off the bow tie. He becomes, as I really think, and I've always said this gives me an excellent opportunity to point out, I've always felt like Matt Smith's 11 Doctor was the Professor Indiana Jones, or at least his first outfit, where he's got the bow tie and he's got the tweed jacket, and whenever he puts on the glasses, it's Professor Jones. And I've always felt like, I don't know if anybody's ever confirmed it. Somebody has to have seen this or pointed it out at somebody. It's too obvious. And then that his girlfriend is an archaeologist, and he points and laughs at archaeologist being a time traveler. It's too on the nose. I know that when Stephen Moffat created River Song and had this storyline in his head, he could not have possibly known that what Doctor they were going to have next, or at the time, I don't even think they knew how long David Tennant was going to be staying for sure, because he had a contingency plan for that first season with Matt Smith if David Tennant had stayed, which he didn't. So anyway, back to Indiana Jones. Any other thoughts on
well, you talked about like him leaving the classroom, and now that you say that, it makes me think, I don't know if this was intended to be a joke, but now I find it very funny, because every time you see him in the classroom, he always leaves by telling the students he'll be in his office at this time, and then gets an assignment and immediately leaves.
Well, most professors do have to tell you when their office hours are going to be. However, does he have tenure he must, because how could you just say off and go across the world to Nazi Germany and get an autograph from Hitler and be back in time to grade papers? At the end of the year, he just has to give a random smattering of grades and then say to the board, like, I'm sorry, guys, I've got tenure. Just like that episode of Futurama.
It has to be, because was it in Crystal Skull, maybe? You actually see all the kids
mobbing him.
Hey, where's the papers? Why aren't they graded? When did is going to be due.
And he has to stay home even more than he just can't be bothered with it. I do love that. One scene that I actually like is when he's being chased and then they go through a library in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, and then he like scoots up to that kid and he just starts asking him a question, and then he just encourages him to get out, and he's like, you're not going to learn everything about this by just looking at a book. You got to go out there and see the world. Anyway, there's this iconic moment. It's the final, also spoilers for all of these movies. No, we're not holding back on spoilers for Indiana Jones. These are old. And if you're listening to this, it's because you're going to see the next movie, and for better or for worse. You know, we have to support theaters. I genuinely believe that, because I don't think it's a dying craft. I think that we're just getting going, and we have to keep them alive, though. We had a really rough time through the pandemic, and a lot of businesses failed, and there are certain places that you just can't go to anymore. They just don't exist. And we don't want that to happen at theaters. I know it's easier to just stay home. I know it sucks if you got kids. I know the drinks and food are like expensive. Just put one in your pocket. They're not gonna frisk you. And I think halfway expect you to do that, unless it's popcorn. But go see a movie. Having said that, at the end of the help me out. I swear to God. No. The one with Sean Connery, when they almost lose the Grail and that woman's trying to get it, the Nazi woman, and then is it the Nazi woman or the Nazi guy? They're like trying to.
Yeah, she's like the double agent.
Yeah, and she falls. And it's just right there. And then Sean Connery comes to get Indiana, and then he's like, I can reach it. And he has to tell him, let it go. And it's like there's this connection that they make kind of in a real way. There's a few minor moments throughout. I don't want to say like for the first time in the whole film, there's a few kind beats and like connectivity there, but it's always tinged with this, I don't know, disconnection, and there's a tenseness. There's something underneath the surface there that's still bugging both of them, and in this moment they really connect. And Indiana Jones realizes, yeah, you're right. Let's just get out. Not everything can be saved. This is one of those times. Let's just go. And they do. And it was really heartwarming and so well placed in the film. The special effects were pretty great in that. In the Nazi melting scene is a guy who drinks from the wrong grail and like ages really quickly. And like the hair, like coming out, and it was.
Goes
and
all Crypt Keeper.
Was it augmented by a bit of CGI? Was it like practical and CGI?
I think so. I think it's similar to what they did in Willow.
Yeah.
With all of the like animal changing. It's like
a primitive version.
Yeah.
From what people would be used to now. They would just do it all in CGI now, for better or for worse. We're big fans of practical effects here. So anytime we get to talk about that, it's just fun for us because we don't work in movies yet, and we do love discussing them.
If anyone wants to give us a job, we're open for discussion.
Yeah. So you have some notes, right?
I think I already said my note.
Oh, okay. That was John Pertwee, not Tom Pertwee. I know who Doctor Who is. Keith Who.
So do we talk about the elephants?
Okay. So it's time.
So Temple of Doom has always been kind of like the polarizing one until Crystal Skull. And I think people kind of forgot that it was polarizing and when that movie came out. But a lot of people are back and forth on it. Some people hate it. Some people say it's their favorite. I know even Quentin Tarantino said that this is his favorite indie movie. And I think even the critics kind of favored it a little bit more because it was trying something different, I guess.
It's the second film in the trilogy. It is a prequel for some reason in the trilogy.
Lucas didn't want to reuse Nazis again, and so he wanted to make it a prequel since it was still going to be set in the 30s or 40s, and so it would have had to have been Nazis for bad guys, so he just went backwards.
I mean, you can find them in any decade.
So what's your hot take on this movie?
I went back and watched it recently, and I thought, I remember Raiders of the Lost Ark and loving it. I remembered the Grail one and it being my favorite. favorite. And I remembered thinking Temple of Doom is a good film. It's just my third favorite of these three. And I gotta say, I didn't love it. I wasn't getting into it the way I thought that I might. There's some good action set pieces, but Ke Huy Quan is easily the best part of this for me. Just knowing as an actor, the backstory, knowing that he goes away from the film industry or works behind the scenes and then comes back later in life and does, I think he was in Crazy Rich Asians and Everything Everywhere All at Once, which I absolutely loved. It was like my movie of the year.
Didn't he win an Oscar for that?
Yeah, I believe he did, and well deserved too. If he didn't, he deserved more. Whatever he got, it wasn't enough. He had to play multiple versions of himself, which these days every film franchise has a multiverse movie where every actor is asked to play a different version of themselves.
Well,
but
even in Indy, like he wasn't even there to be an actor. It was his brother that went to audition. But they liked how he was coaching his brother so much. They asked him to improvise a scene with Harrison Ford. And the scene in the movie where they're playing cards and they accuse each other of cheating. Yeah, they improvised that to see what he could do. And so that came about from their improvisation. And then that's what got him the job. And that was his first acting role.
That's awesome. He's great. I love seeing him, especially come back, like these days, having come back. It's a real, like, I don't even think, it's not necessarily like a comeback story, because it's not like he got into drugs really bad and he stepped, it was just.
It's just behind the camera.
Yeah. His life just had a lot of twists and turns, and a lot of these were in his own power, in his own decision-making process. I commend and respect it. Fame and success, or fame and money, fame and fortune, shouldn't be the be all end all. You can be happy and do other things. Just there's plenty of film stars and musicians, or like, let's say rock stars or pop stars, not necessarily musicians, that have walked away from that lifestyle because it's not for them. Like the fame aspect isn't for them, and being in that industry isn't for them. Anybody who's strong enough to walk away from that and or decide this is the time for me to come back and I'm just going to work as an actor, not a movie star. And that is exactly why I think they missed a trick. I think they should have brought him back. And if they want to continue these Indiana Jones and have spiritual successors to them, like the Jurassic World movies, which, may not be good, not a great example, but I'm saying an example to say the least. If they brought him back to be the Indiana Jones figure, I think that'd be perfect. He did action scenes in Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Well, he was a stuntman for many years too.
Yeah, did he work with Jackie Chan?
I don't.
Jackie Chan does all his own stuff.
I just know he did a lot of stunts in various movies.
Bleep that out. Make people wonder who I didn't know who it was. Because I did not.
He could have worked for Jackie Chan stunt team, but
bleep that out too. I don't want people to know that didn't do as much research as I'd like for people to think I did. And maybe I did, maybe I didn't. Anyway, Short Round and the something of something, or call it like, maybe that wouldn't, I don't think, that's kind of a diminutive. I never really liked that name. It's fine, but whatever his real name is in these movies, which wasn't revealed, was it? They just call him Short Round?
Or just Shorty.
I was like, what the do you not know his name? You should maybe have figured that out for this kid you're taking care of. And what happened to him after that? Did he not get him citizenship or visa, or I don't know. Like, they just completely ignore that. Yeah. Anyway. So, Temple of Doom, what was your final takeaway?
Well, I did go back and watch it, and I don't hate it. But seeing it now as an adult versus as a kid, there's a lot that I'm like, why did they do this? It was a step backwards in every way. It's just the character of Willie, why was she there?
To scream.
She added nothing.
To scream.
Like, she screamed the whole movie.
The whole movie.
And if she wasn't screaming, she was complaining.
Yes.
And she caused more problems than she solved. And the one problem she did solve in the movie, she almost immediately re-caused when she helped them out from the ceiling that's about to crush them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, she immediately re-triggers the trap. But...
Well, she does almost have sex with Indiana Jones.
I think that could have been relegated to any other character.
Short Round?
Well, maybe not Short Round. Okay. I just mean like insert whatever for that.
Whatever?
If that was all the thing they're going to have it for, it'd be like a Bond thing. Just come in, be like, hi, we just met. Okay, you're not in the movie anymore. instead of have her scream the entire time for an almost scene. But
Okay, so James from the Weekly Planet was quick to point out, and he has several weeks in a row now because apparently he just loves bringing up MASH. Don't get me wrong, I've seen every episode of MASH. I watched it as a kid with my dad. It's one of my most cherished memories. And I think MASH kind of also me up, but whatever, because one of the first times I watched it, it was the final episode. So, anytime there's a baby crying at my job now, I think to myself, keep that damn chicken quiet. And for those of you who know, you are the darkened version of Mr. Incredible. Anyway, so in MASH, whenever they had to replace an actor or character, they went with the opposite. If there was a guy who was slept around, always getting with the ladies, they replaced him with a married man who's straight arrow. So, what was I talking about? Indiana Jones?
Yeah.
Okay. So in this, he was quick to point out they did the opposite. The first movie, the woman was she was a drinker, she was a fighter, she was capable, maybe more so than Indiana Jones in certain situations. She didn't need to be rescued. She wasn't the horror movie scream queen. So that's what they replaced her with, was this woman who is a singer and completely useless, who just screams the whole time. And we can't necessarily blame the actress. That's just Spielberg and Lucas were having divorces of their own, I believe, going through and this was a direct result of those bad relationships spawning this, I want to say, bad movie. Having said that, I think that I am judging it harshly on purpose. There is a purpose for this. I will reveal that purpose by the end of the episode.
But like you said, the action set pieces, you can't tell me that minecart sequence did not directly inspire Donkey Kong Country.
Yeah. It was taken right from it.
But a little fun fact about this movie is this is why we have the PG-13 rating.
Yeah.
And I think even the UK adopted their version of a PG-13 after this movie. Mm-hmm. And another fun fact, in America, Red Dawn was the first movie to have a PG-13 rating. And in the UK, it was Tim Burton's Batman was the first to have their version of the PG-13 rating.
Batman 89?
Yeah.
Oh, I wore that VHS out too. So, are you ready to move on?
To the other elephant?
Yes. The even bigger, even grayer elephant.
And this might be the hottest take since our Star Wars film rankings. But I actually like this movie.
I don't understand the hate for it.
I liked it when it came out. I watched it again to see if I was wrong, and I still like it. I had fun.
So I always kind of meant to watch it, and I didn't. I didn't rush right out and see it when it came out. And then all the reviews came in, and they were bad. And I kept putting it off until it kind of fell into this mythical land of that's the worst piece of shit you can possibly imagine. I can't believe that. And then there was the South Park episode with them saying, "Oh my God, they're indie." Well, I finally plugged in and watched Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Really bad title, but I didn't see it. I didn't see what was so bad about this film that it was especially to say that it makes Indiana Jones look bad. I didn't see that.
I think what it was at the time is there had been enough time passed, like with Star Wars, that we idealized the original movies.
Yes, these characters become deified in a sense.
So this was going to be so hyped up, it could never live up to that. And at the time, the casting of Shia LaBeouf was kind of polarizing.
Yeah, that is the one thing that kind of is a bit of a drag on the movie.
And I think a lot of people thought that he was going to replace Indy at the time. And so I think they're like, no, he's not going to be the new Indy.
Yeah.
And so I think that's another reason for the hate. But what I will say about Shia LaBeouf, love him, hate him, I'm not going to change your mind. But I will say, as far as this character goes, he put the work in. He watched all of the original movies to kind of get in the mindset of what Indiana would be like. And then he watched all these old movies of Marlon Brando's because that's how they had cast him as like a Martin Brando-esque person. And then he watched all these movies to get in the mindset of what a greaser would be like. So he put the work in to make this character what it is. And I don't think his acting was bad. Like, he even learned the sword fighting himself.
Yeah, I've never like loved or hated Shia LaBeouf. He's just kind of been there in Transformers, which are Michael Bay films, and I don't love Michael Bay. I hate to go super negative on things, but he was annoying in that. Again, that was how it was written. Sorry, I got off track again. So, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Here's a few of my issues with it. I'll go negative first, because I was trying to critique it harshly. I wanted to see what was so bad about it. I was bracing myself. So, there's a few things, but nothing that would garner the hate. Early on, there seems to be some timing issues. And these are things that I would lobby at Spielberg or even an editor. When Indy makes that swing, when he's escaping like the main room where it's like the first big action piece, and he swings and then he doesn't quite make it to the truck he's wanting to land on. And so he accidentally swings back and falls into the truck. There's a bit of a beat where he says, damn, thought that was closer. And the timing just feels off. It just feels like it doesn't feel real. The way he delivers the line, there's something clunky about it. And it's such a simple line. The same when he's having a discussion with Mutt, Shia LaBeouf's character, and the Men in Black come up, and Shia LaBeouf pulls out a knife and he says, I think you just brought a knife to a gunfight. And it's not it's like it cuts away and they pull the guns out, and then it comes back to him and he says the gunfight part, and also the part where Shia LaBeouf keeps jumping up out of his chair and is like, hey, you want to start a fight with me, buddy? I'll fight you right here, right now. Okay, I'll calm down. Let's have hey, what are you doing? What are you talking about? That's my mama you're talking about. And he's like, kid, what the is wrong with you? Sit the down. This was in the script. They didn't ad-lib that. This is Spielberg and Lucas. So, but again, that's not necessarily like Harrison Ford or Indiana Jones. These are slights on him, and they don't necessarily make him look bad or worse or whatever. He's got a ton of funny lines in this that do work. There's some good action pieces. There is the bit where Shia LaBeouf swings like Tarzan. That is maybe. I don't mind the sword fighting. I love a good sword fight. Show me a movie. I watched a review of this recently to make sure I wasn't really off base with some of these. Somebody pointed out the sword fight as being one of the cringe moments. Like, they likened it to the Tarzan swinging. Show me a movie where sword fighting makes sense in the context of the film. Really, do that. Other than Highlander and Star Wars, there's no time when a duel takes place and it's like, oh yeah, so this is happening now. Especially if it takes place in the modern day. For me, it was like, oh, they're sword fighting and it's on top of a car. It's no different than the tank fight scene in
Last Crusade.
Last Crusade, thank you. So easily the worst part, and the thing that everybody points to, is the stuff when it gets to the actual aliens in the end, and it's the CGI alien. Yeah, the CGI alien doesn't look great, but here's the thing. They're carrying around a crystal alien head the whole movie, and you're telling me this was an actual surprise or plot twist? No, nobody saw aliens coming from the beginning of this movie. It was like, oh my, aliens now? So Indiana Jones is fighting aliens now? Seriously?
That never bothered me. It's just like,
I don't understand the hate for this.
It's like, that's unbelievable. I'm like, curing wounds with a cup of water is?
Yeah.
It's like, people's faces melting off, but being protected because your eyes are closed.
Yeah, and the bit with the Kali Ma pulls out
the heart.
The heart, and that's another. I remembered that differently from when I watched it. From when the last time I watched it, I couldn't even remember. I might have actually been 6 or 7 the last time I watched that movie in its entirety, Temple of Doom. So I remembered. I thought that it was only hinted at, that they're doing like a psychic surgery, like they do in a lot of countries, or at a mentalism show. I'm not going to reveal how it's done. A lot of blood pours out, and something comes out of your skin, but it's not real. So I know he shows the heart. Then they show that the skin is open and it heals back. It seals up. and it's not really explained. There's something supernatural going on there, and there is real voodoo shown. They're like that kid sticking pins in the Indiana Jones voodoo doll, and then Ke Huy Quan has to like whoop ass on that kid too, which is pretty awesome. I just want to say. So back to Crystal Skull. John Hurt's in it.
Yes, always fantastic.
The late great John Hurt.
Also one of the doctors.
Yes, the War Doctor, one of my dad's favorites. A one-off. He did do some audio work. I think later he did some Big Finish audio plays as the Doctor. Some people said he was kind of wasted in this. It was kind of weird, but oh well.
I think another complaint a lot of people had with Crystal Skull is obviously the refrigerator scene.
How did I forget that? I have thoughts.
All right. And I'll admit, that is ridiculous. But this might not be a good example because it's also polarizing. But I point you back to Temple of Doom, where they jump out of the airplane in a raft.
Yeah, it's like Chris Farley falling down a hill over and over and over again. They just keep falling into it's like, oh, now they're in a desert. Oh, now they're in Siberia in a snow mountain. Oh, now they're in a forest. It was how many biomes were there on the way down from the bottom?
Not only safely did we make it out of the airplane onto this mountainside, we go off a cliff and make it safely down to wherever we're at now.
Yeah. So again, I'd never seen this movie until a few weeks ago. I, for some reason, thought that the refrigerator scene would have been further into the movie, like into the middle of it. So it's near the beginning. So I'm watching it and I'm like, oh man, here it comes. And they're doing nuclear testing, and he is in this fake town, with all the mannequins or whatever. And there's like the Russian guys, or maybe they're Americans. It's hard to say who's a double agent or what the hell is going on. So they drive away and he's just stuck there. So he gets into this fridge, pulls the door open. You see it says lead lined. They zoom in on that for like a split second. He gets in, closes the door. I complain about people complaining about things not being realistic enough or what have you. So he gets in. If he just survived and it just like blew it, away a bit, whatever. I actually had a point where my suspension of disbelief was re-engaged when the refrigerator, nothing else from the town, but the refrigerator comes barreling in over the horizon like a missile and hits the ground and continues to tumble end over end over end. And then he just kind of wobbles out and then shakes it off and is like, ugh. Mondays, am I right? It would have been liquid after that. Never mind like the blast. And this is when you pick and choose. Like that was a bit much. And this had to have been a version they toyed with. Nobody came in and was like, it's got to be a refrigerator. And then somebody pitches another idea. No, the refrigerator. This had to have been an idea that somebody broached early on, at least. He gets in the car and leaves the KGB agents behind, and they run up, and then the blast takes place, and there's like this shockwave coming, and he outruns it. I mean, and a little bit of firefight with the guys, a little bit of a fight, and it's tense, and you see that the bomb's about to go off, they keep cutting back to it. There's your scene! It's way better than a flying refrigerator.
When you first told me your thoughts about that, I'm like, maybe it's a money issue, and that's why they didn't shoot it. But after rewatching it, they already had the scene where the KGB were driving the truck away from the blast.
Yeah.
I'm like, they already spent the money on it.
Yeah.
So no, someone was just dead set on this refrigerator.
Yes. And he could have just, they're not Nazis. I don't necessarily want to see them melt for no reason. Unless it's like part of their KGB thing falls off and there were Nazis underneath and then they melt. I'd be fine with that. So it does have the cheesy ending where he gets married. And I think they fully intended to cap this as a tetralogy. And then there's this kind of hint. Some people have just, looked at it as Indiana Jones does not let anybody else wear the hat. But I think it was intended to say to the audience, we're not handing it off to Shia LaBeouf. Yeah. Indiana Jones is Indiana Jones. Harrison Ford is the hero. Maybe there'll be another movie with Shia LaBeouf in it at some point, but it's not going to be this. And not to say that he couldn't be in another one, but he's not going to be Indiana Jones. And that's fine. I felt like the wedding was it was a bit much, but Spielberg and Lucas are getting older. And I think at a certain age, you start looking at things in a different way. And maybe this was for people who were their age or even older that want just a feel-good, happy ending, and I'm not going to judge anybody for that. A few thoughts on Dial of Destiny. I think this looks good. I wasn't excited about seeing it. I just heard new Indiana Jones film, and I thought, am I going to have to see this? I mean, there's some pull to me that I kind of want to. Then I saw the trailer, and, you know, he's like riding a horse down what looks like a main like street in New York, and there's something in a subway, and he's jumping in and out of cars. And then Mads Mikkelsen is the bad guy, and it looks good to me. I genuinely hope it's good. Every review I've heard so far has been bad, so I don't know what that means. But then again, I heard the same thing about Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, and I'm like, are people just too emotionally invested in this? You know, the original Star Wars trilogy got bad reviews. A lot of it got bad reviews when it first opened.
Well, that just seems to be the thing with just review culture in general. No one can give it it's okay, or I didn't like it, but you might.
Yeah.
It either has to be the greatest movie of all time, and I can't dispute that, or it sucks.
Yeah, or it's comic book fatigue. Even though Flash is doing quite badly, it dropped, I think, 72%. And guess what? Everybody's having so much comic book fatigue, they are going to a different comic book movie to put it back on number one. That's right, Miles Morales, back on top, baby!
Before we close out, Indiana Jones has also been the inspiration for many things. Like, obviously, the concept of the Tomb Raider franchise directly inspired by Indiana Jones. But the one I want to talk about is the Mummy trilogy. One, love those movies. I love Brendan Fraser, but the main reason I wanted to talk about it is because I heard someone say, I can't remember who, I tried to find it again before we did this episode, but someone said that Brendan Fraser is Harrison Ford if Harrison Ford ever looked like he was enjoying himself. And because of that line, I'm like, we have to mention this because I can't get that out of my head. That is very true.
That is, yeah. Yeah, especially in The Whale.
Not seen it yet. I need to. I'm going to, but that's another video.
Yeah,
Because Darren Aronofsky's movies, fantastic, but they are hard to watch.
they are that.
And so I think that deserves its own video.
And I think maybe the sequel, he might do a multiverse, or not a multiverse, but a crossover with the Swan and the Whale, where they have to team up to fight depression and anxiety, which we should all do together. Guys, watch that air quality and stay hydrated.
And with that, we'll end our episode. If you made it with us this far, thank you.
And I want to say special thanks to Chase Burdett, who helped me with our music themes. If you like what you heard, Chase is an up-and-coming music producer, so if you were a musician who's looking for a more professional sound, we'll provide links where you can find him below. And he's going to be performing in Berea, Kentucky on July 21st, I think, tentatively, at Rebel Rebel. I'll probably be there. We'll see.
And as always, subscribe, like, leave a comment. Helps us out tremendously. You don't know what to comment? Just leave a little emoji.
Yeah.
That works for us. And until next time, see you.